Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host, and again, I hope everyone had a good Turkey Day, and I hope the kids enjoyed themselves, the families, the senior citizens, the whole lot. It was definitely a day to be thankful for. We're going through all sorts of issues right now, but trust me, we are having traveled all over the universe and via the Marine Corps. We are living in the best country. I mean, we may think we may have problems, but trust me, what I've seen is nothing compared to what I've been exposed to, and that's why I'm so thankful to be here, be alive, and be happily married, and my family, my kids, and the whole nine yards, and friends and whatever. So I wish all of you had sort of the same format that I had. It was a very thankful one and a very appreciative one, and God bless, to us all. You know what I mean? And so, having said that, let's go on and move on now. We're going into the Christmas era. And that's a whole new piece at that point in time. That's Kid Day. that's for the kids, you know what I mean? So you better make sure you go out and make a couple extra dollars, because you're going to have to get something under that tree.
That's right.
If you don't have a tree, I'm not saying to cut one off, a branch off or whatever, but the bottom line is that you got to make sure that those kids are happy and make sure that you're responsible with them and give them all the love you got, okay? With that, now let's get down to our show we're going to have today. What we're going to be doing initially today is that we're going to talk a little bit about a guest that's going to be visiting us here shortly, come this Monday, tomorrow, December the 2nd. One of his top aides from Secretary Carson of Housing is going to be in the Portland metropolitan area at Wapato. We've been talking about this issue for quite some time, talking about homeless aspect of it. It's a very serious issue. It is a crisis. And it's going to take, as one would say, it's going to take a whole village.
That's right.
It's going to take a whole village. It's going to take all of us to resolve this issue. Well, we're going to be fortunate enough to have Secretary Carson's office, our secretary, who's going to be visiting here and looking at what can be done with Wapato and actually maybe identifying it as a homeless kind of a venture aspect of it. And there are many ideas about that particular area. Naturally, in all due respect, as you know, I indicated before, I'm running for mayor. I filed about last week or so ago, and as I indicated before I filed, I am now one of your mayors. There's about 7 of us running, and as far as I'm concerned, you got 7 mayors now. You got 7 mayors right now. We're inviting all of them to come to this table. I'm inviting every one of them to come here and this table and express themselves as to what that platform is and what they're going to be giving to our way of life.
Right.
And that's what this is all about, okay? So my thing has been always saying we got to do something about the homeless aspect of it. It was announced not too long ago that in the Portland Tribune that some 150-odd homeless folks died in the winter last winter. And right up front with you, we got to get these folks off the street. I mean, it's just an inhumane way of how we treating human beings, if you will, here in our presence. Human beings. In fact, we teach animals. At one point in time, we were treating animals like that, and we've solved that problem. We got the Humane Society now, and they get picked up, they get cared for, they get fed, and in all due respect, then they are available for folks to come and adopt them and this, that, and the other. We don't have that system for human beings, and that bothers me quite a bit. So that is my major platform at this point in time. Get them off the street, find places to make sure we house them, train them, and because in all due respect, in our country, our way of life, if you're not making $1 to take care of yourself, you in deep trouble. So some of us are having problems, but the fact of the matter is, we got to find out who's on the street, who's got money, who doesn't have money, who's got mental illness and all this, that, and the other, and get a better feel of what we have to deal with, because then that way we can actually do something about this piece. So anyway, Secretary Carson is going to be here in town in Portland, Oregon, December the 2nd. and he's sort of inviting folks of interest, if you will, and he's going to be giving a tour of that facility, a tour, here in North Portland, right off of Marine Drive. Let's say going west on Marine Drive. Can't miss it. But Google it, and you can find out where it is. It's Wapato, Multnomah County, Wapato, and you'll see exactly where it is. And if you can't make it, they have visuals there about Wapato, and you can look at it. You can actually go and you can even Google it on YouTube. You can Google it on YouTube and take the tour on YouTube if you can. But that some folks can't afford it. But that's not an excuse, because you can go to the library, you can go to a friend's house, and you can get it done. But it's something that we need to do. This gentleman he bought the place, and he's saying that he will not tear it down initially if he can find some responsible entity to come in and utilize it for the homeless. That's what he wants to do. And that the government is very much involved, and then the private sector. He is the private sector, so the only thing we are lacking is really the government side of the deal. But someone has to pay the rent. Somebody's got to be able to pay the overhead, if you will, to keep that thing functioning and making sure that the services are paid for so that these homeless folks can be there. So I can go on and on and on about that, but I wanted to make sure you get that word out. And the reason why I'm bringing that piece up is that I'm going to give you a little background in terms. He was interviewed by a young lady from Washington, D.C. She has her own show, and Candace, and so I thought it was an honor. So I thought maybe what I'd do, I'd take a piece of his interview that he did on homelessness in regards to California. And so I thought that'd be a good introduction to this piece. So let's do that now, and then we'll come back to me, and we'll take a little quick short break and to get things together, and then we'll come back with our main show today. We're talking about right up front with you, and I had it right here on my little calendar piece here. We're gonna talk to I see, well, I put this piece down together. Rappers, Kanye West. We're gonna talk about rapping and its position in during this political era that we're having in. I mean, these are young folks, young millennials, and this, that, and the other, and they should not be left behind. We've got to make sure we consider them. And in fact, I'm making an announcement right now, since I'm the mayor at this point in time. I'm one of those mayors, and that is what I'm going to do is like another Marine that I used to know, that I still know. His name was former Mayor Bud Clark. And Bud Clark had an event on a monthly basis where he had bands. He took entertainment, and he was doing this band thing every month, where he just basically downtown or whatever, and he basically sponsored the band. It was from the city standpoint. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm gonna sponsor a rapper kind of group thing. We can have competition with rappers and let them rap, and maybe we can get the Coliseum, whatever, and get them to do their thing, and then we can talk about other things. We talk about what's on their mind, talk about the issues of our city. It'll be a good way because people are going to come. And we're saying, okay, to come, then we want you to understand what's going on with the city, the operation, and educate folks about it. Because we had a beautiful place here, but the bottom line, we all have to, it takes this village, and they got to be inclusive. We have to be inclusive. So we need to assimilate, if you will, the young folks with a lot of folks across the board. So with that, let's go on and play this first piece, and then we'll take a short break, and we'll come back. And I've got my guest here. You saw him on my last show, and I think this is going to be quite a show. And with that, talking about rappers, and I think you're gonna like this. You're gonna like the presentation. I love it. Okay, let's go on and do this piece right now.
But they don't understand what true compassion is. True compassion is not patting someone on the head and saying, there, you poor little thing, I'm going to take care of your needs. That's not true compassion. True compassion is setting them on a pathway to, realize the potential that God has put in them. And, but, when I went there, and I went to, Skid Row and other places, and you look at the faces of those people on the street, faces that have lost hope. And you realize that the policies that have put them there are not good policies, and we have to do something. So the president and I have talked about this a lot, and many people in this administration. We've got to do something. We would prefer to do it with the authorities there, working in tandem with them. But if they won't do anything for the people, we can't just leave them there.
Right.
There's no question about that.
It's hard, and I had mentioned this to you before we got started, but I have such a unique perspective on homelessness because I have uncles that live on the street, and so much of it, by the way, just what we were talking about, made decisions when in their youth, ended up in prison, in and out of the system their entire lives, and they become drug addicts. And they will choose drugs over anything,
Absolutely.
over an opportunity, over a home, over a family. Drugs
People who don't
becomes-
understand addiction can't identify with it, but it is a monster that takes over your life.
It is. It's. I mean, it's and it's really heartbreaking and it's sad. And it's hard for me to imagine a world where you can alleviate, so many homeless people when if they were given the opportunity,
Right.
they wouldn't take it because of the addiction.
Correct.
So are these some of the conversations that you guys are having behind closed doors? Is how
Absolutely.
such a big problem?
Right. And, I met a few weeks ago with the president and CEO of the American Psychiatric Association and some of the colleagues to talk about what can we do about those people who are on the street. Their feeling is, if you can get them into a stable setting and get the kinds of wraparound services so that they can get their medications and their counseling on a regular basis, that's probably the best thing you can do outside of, them being in a place where they're taken care of all the time. And it's difficult, though, because as you mentioned, a lot of times you offer them a place to be, and they don't take it, and they won't take it. And, then you get into the question of, should there be some coercive activity because it's for their own good? And that becomes a very complex argument.
Right, it's complex. That's exactly right. I think it's incredibly complex, and because I've seen it firsthand and stared it in the face, I can be a bit harsh about it, where I say, these this is just what they want, right? I mean, there is no we've offered them different paths, they just don't take it, and I think people need to understand, what a tricky position that we're in, and just be grateful that we have people like you that are actually taking a look at this issue and wanting to help.
Yeah.
And it definitely helps to have a doctor, right?
Well, we will find a solution. The places where I find the greatest success is places where the federal, state, and local government work together, along with the for-profits, the not-for-profits, and the faith-based organizations. Instead of fighting against each other, they combined recognize that they can do something about it. I find here in Washington that there are people whose names I could even mention, but I'm not going to, who claim to want to help the poor and help with their housing, who won't even talk to me, won't shake my hand, won't anything. Because you're evil. We hate you because you're associated with this. How do you ever solve problems when you have people like that? But we have to move away from that, and we have to always think about the people themselves. What can we do for the people? Because they are our most precious resource. We only have 330 million of them. It sounds like a lot of folks, but it's a quarter of what India has. It's a quarter of what China has. If we don't develop all of our people, we're not going to be able to compete in the future.
Let me ask you a question. What drives you? Because you don't have to be doing this. You could go live a great life somewhere, so accomplished, the whole world loves you, no matter what. You are Dr. Ben Carson. You've got movies about you. You've got a wonderful book that they're forcing sixth graders to read and get inspired off of. What drives you?
Probably James 1:27. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. God puts us here for a reason.
And every single day you wake up and you keep going because you have this belief and you have this faith.
Absolutely.
I love that. I really wish that is just something that I wish could fall on everyone's ears, and it will, because every single person in the world watches the Candace Owens Show.
Only if they're wise.
Yeah, exactly. So we wrap every single episode by actually allowing you to leave a voicemail for the world, or I guess it's kind of a voicemail. You're going to look into this camera, and we're going to give you 2 minutes, and you can say anything you want. Make it inspiring. Ready?
Yes.
On your mark, get set, world, I give you the wonderful Dr. Ben Carson.
You know, every day I wake up and I thank God for the fact that I live in this country. You know, I've visited 68 different countries. I've lived overseas. I've been to some very wonderful places, but no place that really compares with the one that we have. And we should be doing everything we possibly can to preserve it for our children, for our grandchildren, and all the people who come after us. Before the United States became a world power, go back and read about what the world was like with the tyrants and the monarchs and the people who tried to absolutely control everyone's life. People have forgotten about that. I guarantee you, if we go off the scene, it will return. We don't want that. And we want to also recognize that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. It is within our ability, each one of us in our sphere of influence, to decide whether we want to be hateful, spiteful people, or do we want to cultivate real love and acceptance? Not this artificial tolerance where you only tolerate people who believe like you do. But what can you do as an individual in your sphere of influence to create success for other people? Isn't that what it's all about?
That was great. Thank you so much for joining the Candace Owens Show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for what you do every day.
That's a wrap. Thank you guys for watching the latest episode of the Candace Owens Show. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As many of you guys already know.
Well, thank you very much, Candace, for that. I thought that was quite an educational piece as an intro to us here in the Portland metropolitan area. I'd like to also give thanks to a couple of other folks that are very much involved in getting people together. I'm talking about a gentleman I've worked very closely with, Jeff Geiser. He happens to be a High Noon Neighborhood Association. He happens to be the president of that association, and he's definitely in touch with this whole issue as far as homeless and Wapato, as far as Wapato is concerned. And also give thanks to the private owner of the Hirsch Investment Corporation, and that is Mr. Jordan Snitzer, who owned the building and really has a passion for it. He said he's going to do something about it. He's not going to tear this building down. He's going to make sure it works for the homeless. And I got to give thanks to those guys and the rest of the folks and all the other neighborhood associations who are now going to be there. They're going to be at this walkthrough at Wapato on Monday, December the 2nd at 1:30. So if you can come on out and show Dr. Carson's folks, Secretary Carson's of Housing, let him know that we are definitely very much interested in making sure we open this up for homelessness, and we definitely need their support. We need the people in Washington's support, and I got to give a shout out to President Reagan, because I know ordinarily he wouldn't be here he wouldn't be coming to Oregon if he didn't if the commitment wasn't there. And so now that we've got Dr. Carson on board, as far as I'm concerned, he's on board. Secretary of Housing, he's on board. We want to make sure that he sees that we are definitely together here in our city. No issues, no yelling. Just come and tour the facility and give up the support. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and share with our guests and talk about rappers here in our city and their input in the whole political process that we're involved in at this point in time. Take a short break. We'll be right back.
It means to give life. You take the life in you and you put it into something that has life. Animation. What do you choose to animate? You understand what I'm saying?
Excuse me, young bruh, I can tell by the way you carry yourself. You must be looking to make a name for yourself, trying to build a rap in the hood. Excuse me, young sis, I can tell by the way you show yourself. You must be looking to make a name for yourself, trying to catch a thug in the hood. Money Sex, drugs, and violence always lead to the sirens. Cause somebody died or somebody's going to jail for the rest of their life. Looks like death to me, but you say that you do it the way that it is. Then you complain about all of the pain and say, Lord, help me live. Why do you give life to everything that takes it away? Paraphernalia of the game. Why do you animate only things that need Novocaine to numb the pain? This is not living life. Y'all feel like you running things, but the way I see it, them things is running you. Death is funny that way, it starts to poison the brain. Makes you think that the pain is okay, as long as you're feeling okay. Between now and the end of your world, gunshots, STDs and cell blocks, all of the drugs and straight shots, pounds of blood and accidents sometimes. I'm just telling the truth, cause I just worry about you. And the late night news got nothing to say about what you choose to animate. Why do you give life to everything that takes it away? Paraphernalia of the game. Why do you animate only things that need Novocaine to numb the pain? This is not living life. I cry sometimes when I watch y'all die, cause I understand why I used to be you. Only by the grace of God am I still around. Yeah. Now I'm obligated to show you the way to gate to heaven, cause I've been praying. Lord, let them know what they've been missing. I hope you've been listening, cause you've been animating darkness with your life. Why do you give life to everything that takes it away? Paraphernalia of the game. Why do you animate only things that need Novocaine to numb the pain? This is not living life.
There we go. There we go. I mean, guess what? I mean, I gotta do a shout out to my son, Eric, Nick Whitcliffe, Bruce Broussard.
That's right.
I mean, we do it right. We do it right. You know, I got his biological dad was Nick Whitcliffe, and in all due respect, he was a veteran, and he passed away not too long ago. And I want to make sure we gotta give him a shout out on that aspect of it. So now I'm taking the baton. So now it's Eric Broussard. Bruce Broussard. But the bottom line is that he was the guy that put that whole piece together. He was very much involved in rapping, religious rapping at one point in time. And these were young guys that were around here in the city of Portland, right here, going to school together and whatever. And they were out there rapping, and they did shows together. And I mean, it was just a beautiful piece. And so he still has his material. He still has the material. He now has his own business, if you will. He does branding and things of that nature. Well, just like the signs here, like the ones that I have here besides me here, he does that kind of stuff and whatever. So it's just really a blessing that I've got him, and he's got his family, and he's got the kids. We got grandkids. I mean, it's just beautiful. That's why I said I had quite a Thanksgiving. You know, I'm having Thanksgiving every day. The mere fact that I can sit here and talk to you and get you involved in things of that nature. And so, as even on the Facebook and whatever, that's what I do. My idea is just to educate and inform. That's what this show is all about. It's to educate and inform. So with that, let's get right up into the show. Let's see how I got this guest of mine. I'm relying on him to bring it home, because I want him to educate you about why is it so important that this segment of our society, and you hear rapper, and what does that mean? And a lot of times it tends to identify as a negative, but it's not a negative. It's a communication piece. When I was coming on, you know, it was B.B. King, and it was a whole bunch of folks, you know, Ray Charles and things of that nature. But this is just another version. And all I will say is that because it's changed, because it got so commercial, that there was no motivation, if you will, during that particular time to keep doing what they were doing. So in any case, the young folks were left out. They weren't given the opportunity to come to the table to make $1 or $2 so they could eat and feed their family. So indirectly, the old group, I mean, the stuff that I get off of, but guess what? It brought into the young folks, and then they created their own industry, their own identity along that particular line. A very important one. A very important one. And that's just my crude way of defining it from my, that's my opinion with that piece. So anyway, we've got with us today my dear friend, and someone I've been, we had him on last week, and boy, it was such an entertaining. So I asked him about doing something like this, and he said, Bruce, I'd be more than glad to do it. And so he is today, Ruslan S. Muhammad, okay? And this gentleman here, he's got his own business, he's got a family. I was very impressed when I see him on Facebook, and this man's a family man, and he supports his family.
Yes, sir.
And they're growing up big time. And so anyway, so welcome again.
Well, thank you, sir.
Appreciate that very much.
Let me give a big shout out to you for the show and everything that you're doing in educating. Let me also give a shout out to my lovely wife,
Good.
Miss Khan. She watched the show with the children last week, and
Okay.
if I didn't give her a shout out, I might come home to some soccer.
Yes.
I don't want to waste any time. I want to get right into these subject matters because you started off the show with Wapato and the jail and the platform that you're running on for mayor, making sure our brothers and sisters who are houseless or homeless get homes. And I want to try to connect some of these pieces. When you look at the Wapato jail, and this is, I'm gonna be shooting some 3-pointers to thread this needle.
Good. Do me a favor. Just sit your cover just a little bit more so you can see your eyes and whatever.
Oh,
there you go. Just
tip it up a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. Kick it up. There you go. Go back a little bit
I
more.
can tell you what. I can just make sure that they get a shot of the hat.
Okay. Keep your hat on. No problem. Yeah,
But you said so they can see my eyes a little bit.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, just go.
Okay.
There you go. There you
Is
go.
that cool?
Yeah, that's good. You're in good shape now.
All right. But what's very important about the hip hop community right now, and the voice that it has always been for what is happening on the streets, that doesn't make it or did not make it in that day to mainstream media, but today through the internet is actually making it to mainstream media. But I want to go back to 1995 and 1996, because the Wapato jail, that's when the city of Portland and Multnomah County asked for the bond or the taxpayer dollars to build the jail.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Now, the climate in 1995 and 1996 was that we had just had the Million Man March. And in October of 1995, you saw a little over 2 million black men in D.C. on the mall.
Okay.
At that time, President Clinton was in office. On that day, he left office. America was waiting for a bloodbath. But what they saw was one of the greatest demonstrations of peace that has ever ensued. The following year, if you remember in 1991, 92, and 93, the gang violence, so-called gang violence, street organizations that was taking place all across the country was receiving a lot of attention. There were movies that were coming out. There were black politicians, white politicians who were coming out against rap, against hip hop, against the new expression that was making the airways and selling tens of millions of dollars on the West Coast. That the East Coast, where hip hop is founded, didn't get that exposure. But what was being told on the streets of Hollywood was getting that exposure because the same cameras that were making the movies had to get a little residue from the rap scene that was happening. Black men were criminalized in the media as predators and super predators. Measure 11 and legislation to deal with what is today considered toxic masculinity, but that goes all the way back to an era where black men still had control over their neighborhoods, and that was something that white America couldn't handle. So while the culture of the urban cities was being criminalized, legislation was being written to make sure that these brothers and sisters whom were being paraded on the American media as savages, that they need to be dealt with. And so legislation started coming down, 3 strikes, Measure 11s, to criminalize the culture, to lock up young black men and women. And in that era, a bond was proposed to build a jail 11 miles or so outside of downtown Portland. The cost of that jail to build was $54 million. Now, do you know that not one inmate ever reached that jail? For 17 years or so, and then it was sold. Now, without spending too much time getting into the numbers, because in my opinion, this is a grave mismanagement that has been taking place in the local government of this area for quite some time, and that's why it's good to hear brothers like yourself are running for mayor, and that there are other fresh faces that have entered into the council and are on their way. But that's a grave mismanagement, because later on, that building, 17 or so years later on, that same building that cost $54 million of the taxpayers' money was sold for $5 million. And then today we have a proposal that the city just couldn't quite get their feet moving to support, where Mr. Schnitzer purchased that building and offered a partnership. Look, I'll donate the building, I'll donate the land, let's do something for our homeless community. And the city didn't quite move on it. So it's a beautiful thing to hear that the director of housing is going to be making a visit to see what can be done for that property. Now, there's a lot of discussions that really need to be hashed out with the houseless community, with brothers like Ibrahim Mubarak and others who are homeless and houseless advocates, because there has to be a consensus on what is the proper way to assist the houseless and the homeless community, because there's a culture within the community that has forced houseless communities to live a life that we don't necessarily understand. It doesn't pencil out on paper. The math of the existence doesn't make sense, because when you're living a life that is uncommercialized, you're living a life that are like the hunters and gatherers of just a few hundred years ago, of our native brothers and sisters, that when when they reached these shores, they learned how to live in these parts from. But that's how our brothers and sisters live in the houseless and homeless community. And without a real ear to hear how they can transition from that existence, that primitive existence, into housing, into a job, into being self-independent, there's steps to that. And potentially a place like Wapato can be a catalyst for that. But we also have to take a look at the stigma of what was potentially to be a jail now being offered to the houseless and the homeless community. We have to take a look at, with the media and with internment and concentration camps that have been used in the past to push people into, or so-called ghettos that were black communities, that we're being forced into for economic reasons. We can't have that be the same thing that will happen into what was to be a jail, now being proposed for housing. Because, Mr. Carson expressed in the segment that we only have 330 million. And he expressed that as if the people are a great resource. And I hope that the brother comes and expounds upon what I heard in that clip from Miss Owens, is that with this small community of 330 million people in America, as compared to nations like Indonesia, like China, like Malaysia, that have huge populations, that every one of us are a resource. And in order to extract the useful knowledge from those resources, we have to bring us all in together and really take an honest look at, you know, what's taking place and what needs to be done. And segueing that into our brothers in the rap and the hip hop community, like your son and many, many others. You know, I wanted to expound last week on how proud I am of our hip hop community for forcing their voice, our voice, into the mainstream. And, you know, something that made me really take an economic look of the hip hop community. You know, hip hop is my culture. I grew up, I'm born in 75. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. That's my era. That is like my Motown when you talk about rap and when you talk about hip hop. And when you talk about all the sampling that has been used from our brothers and sisters that went before us, right on down to now. That's no less than the Metu Neter and the hieroglyphics that we were looking at on the walls. This is the modern means of communication of what is happening with the youth. And when you look at how we have forced our way into the mainstream and the numbers that we generate, that's a voice that the youth are listening to, that I'm not sure that their parents are aware of the message that they're getting. And so with that message through the Million Man March, through 10 years later, another Million Man, and another 10 years and another Million Man, that voice of the youth has been amplified because a pioneer, a brother that's still in our midst, whom you have been a great supporter in this area, and whom we really do need to garner more support of in this area to get that man into this area so that he can shed and shine the light on Portland, Oregon, as he shined on all the major metropolitan areas in America that produced the Million Man March. But we need to bring that man, Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, out to this area to shake the hands of the brothers and sisters who are rapping in this area, and the brothers and sisters who are running for office in this area, who are farming. Big shout out to our brothers Art and Shantae at Mudbone Grown and the work that they're doing in farming and growing our food. A shout to Amanda Yampolsky making clothing and teaching black youth how to make clothing. These are the types of things that we have to find ourselves engaged in today, which has been the voice of the rap and hip hop community for quite some time now. So it's on, and I just forgive me for my passion and spirit on it. But brother, these issues that you are bringing up on this show, man, this look at what is happening. Look at the conservatives today. Look at the liberals. Look at the Republicans. Look at the Democrats today. It is as if we are going through another shift. And it's unfortunate, like men like Mr. Carson, who I have to admit, you know, I've heard Mr. Carson say some things in the past that didn't vibe with the black community for sure. But it is unfortunate that he has a fear and is afraid to go to speak with and shake hands with some of our brothers and sisters because we automatically condemn him for him being a part of the Trump administration. We automatically condemn brothers and sisters like Candace Owens for making a way because they don't agree with the status quo. So, you know, these are some of the things that interest me, and you know, I mean, this will be an interesting thing. If any of you all can make it, I would encourage people to go out to Wapato, see Mr. Carson while he's here, because if we can turn this into something of good for our people who have fallen on some bad luck with homes, this will be a great thing, because this has been a huge bill for the taxpayers of Multnomah County, and this is something we can't do business like this.
No, we can't. Okay. In all due respect, you're right on. I'll say right off front, this is a non-partisan issue.
That's right.
We're right in the midst of an election. The R is in the D, but hey, let me tell you, this is a non-partisan issue. It can be a major crisis, and like you indicated before, this is one of his staffers, by the way, that's going to be representing him here locally with us. But the whole idea is that Portland is so strategically located.
That's right.
You got California on one side, and you got Washington on the other side, Seattle and L.A. And people are saying, and guess what? It's slowly but surely just coming to close right on in the Portland Metro. We're not Seattle, and we're not L.A. right now. You got me?
You probably need to say that again.
See, people just sitting, and that's why I'm saying that's one of the reasons why I ran. You know, because in most cases I went out to outreach to both the city and to the county, but they didn't have time to listen to what I'm sharing with you today. They didn't have time to reach out to a person like yourself to see how they can actually. They've got folks here. It's going to take this whole village, but they don't know how to do it. And I'll just be right up front with you. Even the definition of a politician, as I see it, in most cases, they don't have they don't have the resume. You know what I'm saying? We have to change that format a bit, if you will. You got to have some sense of background if you're going to be dealing with an issue. You got me?
Let me ask you, what do you think is missing? Talk about some of those bullet points,
Okay.
those background pieces that are missing.
Well, in all due respect, we don't have the background. Again, like I said, I always use the resume. And I said this once before in terms of a lot of folks will look at me and say, well, okay, fine. Gee, but you've been running for all this time, but you've never won. I said, look here, I won when I filed to run for office. And the reaching out part is that because we don't fall in that situation, the bottom line is that I have a resume that reflects that I've been out there and involved. I came here as a Marine recruiter.
Come on.
I came here as a Marine recruiter from Vietnam. You got me? And so when I was recruiting, I was out there dealing with young people. As one would say, and in all due respect, when I see a young, during that particular time, it was called an expungement aspect of it, a system such that if a person had a little record in their background, I'd go to court. I was at court. I'd go down to JDH, if you will. And if a young dude basically might have ripped off a TV or something like that, or sit in front of a judge, or smoked a joint, or something like that, well, the judge is about ready to, and then I knew the judges and whatever, they'd call me in. And I'd meet with, he'd take a recess, and I'd go in the back, and we'd sit down and chat. And if I saw that the young dude was salvageable aspect of it, I'd communicate with him, and I'd come back out, and then the gentleman was given the opportunity to say, look here, well, Mr. Broussard said that, which I had talked to him before anyway, so to speak. Mr. Broussard said that, look here, I may have the aptitude, because you still got to pass certain criteria, and you have to be physically fit, that type of deal. And with that, he said, look, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll kind of think, okay, fine, you spent 2 years in the Marine Corps, or spent 2 years in the Army, or Navy, any one of those dudes, because I was the kind of guy, it was a nonpartisan issue with me. If a person didn't really fit the criteria of the Marine Corps, and they were Navy material, I'd push them down to the Navy or to the Air Force. You got me? Or to the Coast Guard. I mean, I was across the board, and so that was very. It worked well, if you will. I mean, we opened up the first office. I opened up the first office in Northeast Portland, right there on Shaver and MLK. That building there where those mirrors are right now. I opened up that office. And I'm just being quick about this piece, but when I got through, after I got through and I left, they put a pipe bomb out by it, but not when I was there. They put a pipe bomb. But I knew all the people on the street. I knew the young people on the street. They weren't no gang members to me. They were just young people looking for a way out.
That's right.
And I gave them an out. So those perks. So my point is that what's missing is that we're needing leadership, people that will go. Quote, if they want to talk about that 10% within our society, well, if that's the problem, then guess what? We want leadership that can relate to that 10%. I mean, when I ran for county commissioner, and I saw the issue as far as homelessness, I was out there sitting down there with brothers and sisters, white folks too. There's a whole bunch of white folks that are homeless today, and I'd sit down there and they had all kinds. They were doing all kinds of things, if you will. There was prostitution. I talked, excuse the French, I talked to the pimps. I talked to the drug dealers, but they're all trying to make an income. Everybody's got to eat.
Right.
To a degree. I can't disrupt something if I don't have a solution to it. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
That's natural. That's a normal deal. But my point is that I saw the issue, and then I looked around, and I didn't see anybody talking to these folks. You see what I mean? Like, for instance, okay, fine, you know, a good example of this is like the Metrodome piece that we're involved in ourselves with. When a person says, okay, they're on drugs, and so they get free needles to shoot up. Well, something's wrong with that to me. See, you're going to give someone something to shoot up But I'm from that old adage of the cuckoo's nest when they had to deal about giving someone medication. Got me?
Right.
We had an institution to deal with mental illness aspect of it. It was sitting right there in Beaverton, up in the
Right.
western in Beaverton, and so the developers came there and tore it down, never built another one. Okay, but at that facility, when folks were in there, they were given that medication, but they had to take that medication right there in the front of that, right in front of that nurse at the door. See, but out here now, they give it to you and for free, so to speak, and then you go out and sell it.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So I said to myself, well, okay, the solution to that problem, as I saw it, and I shared it with some folks, I said the solution to that problem is that rather than we've got a system, we had a problem with bottles and cans. But what we did, and that
Yeah.
you came up with the bottle and can.
took care of that.
It took care of that. Put a dollar on it, or 50 cents or something. We don't have no problem with that, right? So my point is that with the needles, you can do the same thing. Put 50 cents on the needle, and we won't have no problem because they'll deliver the needles to the same place where they have the doesn't cost any more money. Just put it in the box, you know what I mean? Put the needle and you sell it. But for futuristic wise, I'm sitting there and saying, look here, but still, they come into that window, but I don't like the idea of them shooting up to a certain degree. Why not create a pill, if you will, if you're gonna have to do the shoot up? Well, when you get your what's the other shot that we normally get right here for the winter? The flu shot. What happens? You go to a pharmacist. The pharmacist shoots you right there. Why can't they do the same thing with the Metrodon, Pete? Then you know you're guaranteed that if they got that prescription, that they take it right there. Because otherwise, they sell it. They sell it. They sell the dirty needles. They sell the whole nine. They don't even take the Metrodon. They'll just shoot it on. So I'm just saying, I work outside of the box. That's just kind of like saying something to word. And we need more people outside of the box. You know what I'm saying? And you know, and so my age factor just shows experience and exposure. I've been doing this stuff for years. You got me?
Right.
And so, but you know, and I don't take that so-called well, you're too old and you're this, that. No, I'm a man of wisdom, and I'm sharing. Right. You know, and so consequently, we need more folks in that arena too, to be able to share it with you. That's why you're here on the show. As far as I'm concerned, I'm giving it to you because at some point in time, I want you in this seat. And then we need to bring somebody else in that seat. See, and we have the capacity to do that. So my thing here now is that with reference again, like a Wapato piece, I said, and it might be hard sell. My whole thing with Wapato, right in front with you, the capacity was 500 people. 500 people, but there's enough land there to put another 400 or 500. In fact, the building can even go up another 2 levels. They built it that way in the construction aspect of it. So you can accommodate at least 1,000 people there right off the bat. But now when you Google the number of homelesses that are out on the street, you got 2 different areas. You got just regular, and then you got veterans. Veterans run about 1,500, okay? But they have a system. But these folks are in line. They've been vetted. Plus the fact they've gone through that boot camp. And we all have that sense of cleanliness. We were taught that in the boot camp aspect of it. There's a whole different kind of an individual as opposed to the person over here. And the person over here, in the masses, they say we got about 34,000 people out there. Well, you got all those tents and this, that, and the other. But you don't know who they are. You don't know on the street. They didn't go to boot camp. You get me? So my thing is that, what do you do with those folks? Well, first thing you got to do, you got to just pick all those people up. Pick them up and take them to some area where you can vet them. Find out who's on the street, what's their background, what's lacking. You got me? So I'm saying, then if you do it now, we do 2 things. They said there were over 100 and some odd people died last winter. Well, that's about 3 or 4 months right here now that we're going to be looking at with people dying over 150, maybe 200 people might die this winter. Well, my point is that, hey, that's a quickie way. You're going to pick them all up. You cut that piece off. But now the others, and you say, well, what do you mean? How are you going to pick them all up that much? That's going to cost all kinds of money, this, that, and the other. Well, my thing is, think of it. I'm out the box now. I'm sitting out the box. We've all been told here in the Pacific Northwest that the big one is coming, the earthquake. Well, who do you think is the first responder? The National Guard.
Break
That's
it down. Break it down.
Yeah,
That's right.
the National Guard. So if the National Guard, the first responders, they need training right now. A lot of times it takes them a while to get caught up to react to something. You got to call these people out. You got to be ready. I mean, sure, they're sending out little messages, spend some money to this, that, and the other, but folks still don't really understand what do you do. You got me? So I understand that. So my point is that, okay, fine. This could be a training exercise. Let's go on and pick up all the folks up in the Portland metro area. If you got a tent, that'd be the first thing. Pick them all up because they're living in danger. It's inhumane in terms of how they live it. Being able to urinate all over the place, spreading disease, all kinds of. It's really sad to see them get that definition with them at this point in time. You got me? So my thing is that if you pick them up the street, the guard comes up with no bayonets and weapons, if you will. You got me? But they got the vehicles and this, that, and the other. They pick them up and they say, well, where do you take them at, Bruce? Well, very simple. Where do you take them if we did have a disaster? To the armories. They got armories all over the state. See? So you pick them up, take them to the armory, and then you call the guard out for, say, 90 days, and they do their training for that 90 days. They got doctors, they got nurses, they got food, they got tents, they got everything right there in that National Army piece. You see my point? See, so my point is that then now you know exactly who's on the street. Exactly. Now that could be used as a mental illness institute, because if a mental illness institute, it's my understanding the city now is coming out with a deal with one of the new city council person. They're going to be coming out with a deal with the fire department. Who am I thinking about for the city? Just got elected.
You're not talking about Miss Hardesty.
Yeah, Miss Hardesty. Miss Hardesty. She's going to be basically she put together a special program. Going to cost the city about $500,000. They're going to be picking up people that are kind of alcoholic or druggers or mental illness aspect of it. But then I still don't know where they're going to take them. You got me? But then when you start talking about police work, that's their job in many ways. And she's not going to involve the police. That bothers me a little bit. You know, you just can't just pick up anybody. You know, unless you really got the experience. You say, well, we just want to get the good alcoholics and the good druggers, if you will, and we're going to take care of those folks. Well, what do you mean? That person is sick too. I mean, you may not see a person carrying a gun or a knife. You know, I was trained to use anything around me as a weapon. I hate to put it that way.
No, let me just touch on a couple of points, because your thinking outside of the box really sound like solutions to me.
Yeah.
But I think where the breakdown happens is when you talk about the National Guard, police or local law enforcement, pick up or round up. We have histories
I know
that cause us to not want to deal with that. But let me try to attempt to tie it all in, because what the brothers and sisters who are homeless and houseless, who are taking residencies in the land, what's coming is what you're talking about by force. But what you are talking about is no, let's do this more humanely before we reach crisis. Let's do something about this now. And so as I was listening to you, I was racking my mind and brain on like, oh man, if I was a youngster hearing this.
Yeah.
But then it took me to the Portland Harbor Superfund site, the Willamette River, and the issue with how toxic and contaminated our rivers are. But there's already been an approved and proposed plan to clean up that river.
Okay.
Part of that cleanup is engaging the houseless community living along the banks of the cleanup site, because they're going to have to cordon off, set perimeters to clean up. And the people who have taken residency on those lands are going to be moved. Where the breakdown is that when you're living day to day, just trying to get your next meal, trying to figure out how you're going to get warm through the night,
Yeah.
you can't focus on these issues that we're talking about. So the plan to engage the brothers and sisters before this takes place is something that we got to make haste to get about.
That's what I'm talking about.
Brothers like yourself, brothers like myself,
Yep.
brothers and sisters who care,
Yep.
have to really get about the work of finding out the immediate needs and then going about getting it. Like when you're talking about, man, to set up the transportation, to set up the housing, the electricity, the water, and the food, to get the brothers and sisters to a state of being employable, it's not that much. It's not that much. It's certainly not what was lost on the deal on the Wapato jail. And then it was proposed, or it was said that that $5 million that they got for that jail was earmarked for housing. Well, let's see it. We're not talking about Project 1000 and housing setups where you are offering double loans, where you're gonna loan out at 5 to 10% the down payment on a home, then you're gonna loan out from 10 to 20% the mortgage on the home, and people, you're gonna start off first-time buyers or first-time buyers in a double loan debt situation to create another 2007, 2008 crisis. This is insanity. So when you think about the needs to build new infrastructure, to repair and retool the fossil fuel infrastructure, to get ready for new and clean energy, there's ditches to be dug. There's materials to be made. And these individuals, and you know, I say these individuals and our brothers and sisters as if I'm not in. No. We're all in this together because most of us are not but a few
It's a fact.
mishaps
That's right. Yeah.
from living off the beautiful
That's right.
Oregon land
That's right.
ourselves.
That's right. Yeah.
But if we were to take these communities and start using them to cut up and carve up the land for new infrastructure, because there's quite a bit of land in Oregon and in the Portland metro area. That's another thing that needs to be discussed is the best usages of these lands are not always about landowners and renters. The best use. Go ahead.
Let me share a thought with you. No, this is good because, and I hope the viewers understand what we're doing here, because you could have these same conversations at your own home with neighbors and talk about this. I mean, share your thoughts. I mean, we got a well-educated community.
Always have.
I mean, big time. Always have. That's why America's so great. Let's put it that way. You got me? See? So look like we're right at the end of the deal now. We got so important. We've forgotten the deal. Boy, time goes. Time goes. Well, folks, as you can see, time goes. But hey, we're right on line. Get your people together. Talk about this stuff. I'll be back next week, and we'll continue our conversation. That's what this is all about. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Enjoy.